Welcome to Rizki-Produkt Official TV, a platform where political advocates champion institutional and structural comprehensive reforms, driven by the principles of social democracy, to transform the Gambia. Streaming contents from the heart of Banjul City in the Gambia. Welcome to the second segment of our series of credit score, in the context of the Gambia overwhelming debt under its economic stewardship, an alarming secret of systemic failures. Don't forget to show your support by subscribing to our channel. We look forward to bringing you more content focused on political activism and socio-economic insights in the Gambia. Let's commence. What are some of the consequences if the Gambia continues in its reckless sustainable borrowing and poor economic appetite? If the Gambia continues to increase its debt without addressing its current economic vulnerabilities, the consequences could be significant and potentially harmful to both the government's financial stability and the well-being of all Gambians. Here's a breakdown of what could happen. 1. Higher risk of debt distress. The Gambia is already classified as being at high risk of debt distress by institutions like the IMF and World Bank. If the Gambia continues to borrow, particularly from non-concessional sources, which have higher interest rates and less favorable terms, it could lead to even greater difficulties in repaying debt. A higher debt burden could force the country into a situation where it cannot meet its debt obligations, potentially leading to a sovereign default. In such a case, the Gambia could lose access to international credit markets, making it harder to secure financing for important projects like infrastructure and public services. 2. Higher borrowing costs. Each time the Gambia increases its debt, its credit rating could deteriorate further. This would result in higher interest rates on future loans because lenders would perceive the country as a higher risk. The Gambia's ability to borrow from international markets would become more expensive, compounding the existing debt burden. Even concessional loans from institutions like the IMF or World Bank could come with stricter conditions like economic consolidation and reduction in public investments. Higher borrowing costs mean that more of the country's budget would go towards servicing debt instead of funding essential services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. 3. Austerity measures and reduced public spending. Increasing debt could trigger further austerity measures mandated by international financial institutions. These measures often include cuts to government spending in areas like healthcare, education, and social welfare to control the fiscal deficit. For the Gambia, where poverty levels are high, these cuts could lead to significant social consequences, particularly for the most vulnerable populations. For instance, a large portion of government revenue could be diverted to servicing debt rather than funding programs designed to reduce poverty or improve living conditions, resulting in worsening inequality and social unrest. 4. Further currency depreciation and inflation. Continued borrowing could lead to a severe loss of confidence in the Gambian economy, putting more pressure on the national dalasi currency. As the currency weakens further, the cost of imports such as food, fuel, and other essential goods would increase, leading to further inflation. Rising inflation would further erode the purchasing power of Gambian citizens, hitting low-income households the hardest, and worsening the already precarious economic situation. The further depreciation of the dalasi would also make it much more expensive to repay external debt denominated in foreign currencies, further exacerbating the debt situation. 5. Loss of investor confidence. A country with an escalating debt burden is seen as a high-risk investment. If the Gambia continues to increase its debt without a clear, credible, and sustainable repayment plan, it could lead to a loss of confidence among both foreign investors and development partners. Investors may choose to pull out or avoid investing in Gambian projects, stalling economic growth. For instance, tourism and agriculture, two key sectors in the Gambia, require investments in infrastructure and technology. A lack of investor confidence would stall these developments, limiting job creation and economic diversification. 6. Dependence on international bailouts. Increasing debt could push the Gambia into a cycle of continuous reliance on IMF bailouts or other international support to avoid default. While these programs can provide temporary relief, they often come with strict conditions that limit the country's ability to make autonomous economic decisions. For example, structural adjustment programs, SAPs, typically require countries to privatize state-owned enterprises, reduce public sector employment, and cut subsidies, which can lead to increased unemployment and poverty in the short term. This is currently being experienced with the Gambia government reduction of subsidies in sectors such as fuel, agriculture, and imports, leading to price increases and underinvestment. 7. Impact on future generations. Continuing to increase debt without a sustainable repayment strategy would place a heavy burden on future generations. They would inherit a debt-ridden economy, limiting their opportunities for growth, job creation, and development. The government might be forced to cut spending on key areas such as infrastructure, education, and healthcare in the future to deal with debt repayment, stalling long-term economic progress. This highlights the urgent need for fiscal responsibility and discipline from a reformist government. While borrowing is not a bad financial supplement, it can be a necessary tool for development. The Gambia must carefully manage its debt to avoid the negative spiral of debt distress. To mitigate the risks, Gambians must seek to elect a reformist government that can focus on fiscal reforms to improve revenue collection and reduce reliance on external borrowing. This is where broadening the tax scope, streamlining business registration and commercial land allocation processes, encouraging more businesses in the informal sector into the formal sector, put an end to nepotism and cronyism, and encourage entrepreneurship. 2. Invest borrowed funds into productive sectors that can generate returns and help repay the debt rather than spending borrowed funds on leadership's personal choices, low productivity sectors, and pork barrel projects. 3. Engage in debt restructuring and seek concessional loans with favorable terms by a credible and knowledgeable negotiating team. A crucial importance. 4. Diversify the Gambia's economy to reduce vulnerability to external shocks and ensure long-term growth with policies aimed at stimulating the economic multiplier at the forefront of every economic agenda. Without these reforms, the continual increase in debt could severely undermine the Gambia's economic stability and the well-being of all Gambians.